Hey folks, Sir Charles Carey here, and I have a question for you. Why write a book? Now, there's pros and cons to everything, and I just want to share with you. Wow, I guess I'm pretty far away from the mic, so it would be close, better if I was closer to the microphone. So let me do this again. Why write a book? And the truth is, I believe that everyone has a story. Now, that does not mean that everyone needs to write a book, but everyone definitely has a story. But the question is, why write a book? And the reason to write a book is simply because there's a story. It may be your story, it may be someone else's story, but there is a story. Now, depending on the person and depending on the reason, that's why you should write the book. Well, the story was a tragedy turned to triumph. It was a success story. There were milestones achieved in the process of this situation. A person wasn't expected to become or accomplish a certain thing, and they did it against all odds. So the point still remains you have a story, and your story needs to be told. And I always say there's always someone waiting to hear your story the way you tell it. And I really mean that because there are too many people with their voices stifled. And the reason why there's a lot of mental health because people have their voices stifled. No one wants to hear them. No one is listening, and so on and so on. You see, what's big to me may be small from the eye you see. So, what's the tragedy that you want to tell that story? What's the success that you would like to tell that story? What milestones have you achieved? And that's a good reason to tell that story, to write that book. Now, some people say, well, you know what? We're in a pandemic. People aren't going to bookstores. Trust me. If there's one thing that will last and has lasted the test of times, that's stories, that's information. And even though we're in the what is it, the super information highway, people still like to touch and feel the book. They want to make notes, they want to highlight things, depending on the genre, the type of book it is, and what they gain from it. I've been fortunate enough to write in four genres. I've written spoken word, I've written a memoir, I've written self help, and I have written a resource book. For the first time that I wrote my very first book, Poetic Expressions, it was therapeutic. Now, I'm not saying that I was having any kind of mental challenges, but I recognized what it was. It was therapeutic. It was a relief. It was like the floodgates were open for me to express my emotions, my thoughts, my inhibitions, everything. And it just flowed. And that's a good thing because a lot of times we live and die by old traditional thinking, old traditional sayings, what goes on in this house stays in this house, etc., etc. And in some cases, that specific thing may be true, but I believe it's been taken uh, too far, and many people have suffered because of it. So, why write a book is because you've got something to say. And even if you told me, like I usually say, there's always someone waiting to hear your story the way you tell it. So I really encourage people to write their stories. And it doesn't matter, even if it's not about your own challenges in life or your own successes. Maybe you want to write a children's book. Maybe you want to write a mystery or some other type of a book of fiction. Maybe you want to write a romance novel. But the foundation to all writing is usually the same. Now, please feel free to share your comments. I want to know what you think, what you feel, what your views are on this topic because it's really important so I can kind of like sometimes know how I can answer your questions if you have any questions. And when it's all said and done, I look at another thing that probably isn't spoken about very much, and that's legacy. Now, maybe your family was the first family to leave town or invent something or create something or start selling dinners at, then they wind up getting a restaurant. But the point is, no one may know that in your family line. No one may know that in your town if it was all started generations ago. That's a good reason to write a book or to tell your story. And I do believe that the whole tell your story, live your story, be your story, it's not just a catchy phrase, it's realistic. And it's more realistic to many of us than we may realize simply because no one's ever asked us what we thought. No one's ever shown us how to. We've never had access. Well, now you do. And you don't have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do this. I believe that when you learn something, you can have that for a lifetime. You can use that tool, that resource for a lifetime. And as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. So stop allowing yourself to be taken advantage of and start collaborating and learning and using the skills that are available to you, what you have access to, and doing something so that those people that are watching you can know that they can do it too. And if they're your people, meaning your family, your children, your grandchildren, maybe they will supersize what you have done and make you prouder than you ever would have been, could have been, or known that it was possible to be. So that's all I really want to share. I don't have a lot to say, but if you have any comments, please post your comments. If you have any questions, please post your questions. And definitely, I would like to invite you all to the Tell Your Story, Live Your Story, Be Your Story workshop that is on February 27th. I believe this is something that will make a huge difference in your life. Most of the people that have taken my workshops have gone on eventually to do much bigger and better things. Even if you did it once, it's something you have never, ever done before. If you're in a professional field, here's another reason to write a book. My mentor told me a long time ago, he said, Sir Charles, if you want to be a serious speaker, you want to be taken seriously, you need to be published. Now, it's true. A lot of times people will buy your book and they may not read it. But what is also true, I've had people buy thousands of dollars worth of books and they have read them. So no matter what the pro is, there's always a con of equal or greater value at times. So I would encourage you to tell your own story. Because see, you can tell me your story and that's fine. And I can, say, hey, I can use that for one of my keynotes. Yeah, I could. But there's always someone waiting to hear your story the way you tell it. You see, I'm not the author of your story or your life, and I may be able to pretty it up, but if you put it side by side, the sentiment, the emotion, the conviction, all of those things that your story entails, I wouldn't convey it the same way. That's why the organic and authentic aspect should come from the author of that story. And yes, I do have a way of helping you get the story out and get yourself in a position where you can benefit. And yes, that is where I'm leading, but you need to understand that these are some of the different reasons why people get stuck, what people don't know, and questions people don't ask. So instead of spending thousands and thousands of dollars, why don't you invest in yourself and tell your story? My workshop is called Tell Your Story, Live Your Story, Be Your Story. And I would say a good portion out of the 6 to 8 classes that I've taught on this topic, they have been able to take advantage of the information. And you know what? That information doesn't leave them. They have written their own books. They have had TV interviews, talking about network television. They have had online interviews. They've had radio interviews. They're doing workshops, and they're expanding on the education that they received. So why write a book? I don't know. You tell me. If you can benefit from the advantage and if you can leverage that opportunity, why wouldn't you? So do yourself a favor. Do your family a favor. Tell your story. Live your story. Be your story.